So, congratulations for Liquor Store Dreams.
Thank you.
Now, it's being showcased here at the Asian Pacific Film Festival. How does it feel for you?
It feels amazing because this is pretty much where I got started as a filmmaker, and so it's truly a homecoming for me to be able to premiere like my first feature-length documentary film, just everything here at the festival. So I'm really excited.
So you've been at this festival before, and at what capacity?
So I was part of their Armed with a Camera Fellowship
Oh.
back in 2018, and I was required to make a 5-minute short film, which I made Liquor Store Babies, which is the short film version of this film. And so they pretty much mentored me through that process. It was the first time I actually made a really good short. Prior to that, I just made really bad shorts. So it was such a accomplishment for me, and knowing that it did so well in the festival circuit, and then I think it's the thing that propelled me to make the feature-length documentary.
Wow, it sounds like this festival really built up your confidence to this documentary film.
Yeah.
So tell us what sparked you to do this documentary film in the first place?
I think once, the Liquor Store Babies came out, which you can watch it on YouTube, Vimeo, and it did pretty well with through the festivals, and people's reactions were really great. And I think somebody asked me or told me that I should make it into a feature-length documentary. At first, I was obviously taken aback just because going from a 5-minute film to a 90-minute feature-length is not easy, and I didn't know a first thing about making it into a feature length. And so it wasn't a year later where I was thinking about the story, and there's a scene in my film where Danny rebrands his store from Best Market to Skid Row People's Marketplace, and it was during that event where it was such a joyous moment of two different communities coming together that I felt like I saw an ending to the film that I wanted to make. And so it was from there that I planned a Kickstarter, just started my quest in documentary, just because I didn't have a direct pathway. Like, I didn't know what it took to actually make a film. So I feel like for the next 3 years, it was such a learning process for me every step of the way.
Now, how did you convince everyone to participate in this project? I mean, a short film is one thing, but you're talking about a long documentary that takes quite some time.
At least for the short, I think we only shot for a couple of days, and Danny and my dad were okay with it. I think when it came to the feature length, obviously I asked them, hey, I'm thinking about making this into a feature length documentary, and I had to just preface, this could take years, and I might have to be with you here, there, and also involve your family in some type of way. And I think that they really understood and believed in the vision that I wanted to have in this film. And so even with my dad, I feel like he didn't know where it would go, so he was kind of skeptical, but I think it was like his love for me that he just let me do whatever I wanted to do.
It is kind of funny, right? Culturally, they would be very suspicious about your actions here, especially here in America.
I think they also thought, oh, it's not going to be anything, so just do whatever you want to do. Like, just play around, whatever. Because I don't think that at the end of the day, or even at the end of the film, they imagined that I would make a film like this. I'm sure that once I was asking certain questions, that they probably knew that this could be the type of story I could tell, but I don't think they had a full grasp of the extent of the full story, especially because I was only filming with my dad and Danny separately. Like, none of their scenes ever crossed or they ever came together.
Now, of course, you are a participant in this documentary. Usually most documentarians are just the fly on the wall. How did you want to handle that part of you being a character in your own film?
I thought initially it would be good enough that I was just a vehicle to telling my dad and Danny's story, that it was good enough that I was just that my voiceover was in it. But at the end of the day, there were so many scenes where it felt kind of empty that I felt the need, I guess. Like, I didn't want to do it, but I felt like it was necessary for the story. And for me, I like to, anything that serves the overall story is my mission. So even if I was slightly uncomfortable because I had to set the scene, place myself, figure out how to act, things like that. I mean, luckily it worked out.
I'm curious, how often do you set up a camera with you and your dad eating together?
Not often. Yeah.
That is actually pretty funny. Now, tell us about the liquor stores themselves, because they are a central part as characters of your story.
Like what specifically? Because there's so much history, so much to say.
Well, let's go with a little bit of history, and then talking about the production that you had to handle, because you have to do it for quite some time, especially filming it there.
Yeah, I think even when I was making Liquor Store Babies, I always wanted to make something about liquor stores, just because my dad has been an owner for so long, and I felt like this is such a special place that I would like to do something with it. And I also, even when I met Danny, I was like, wait, your dad owns like a mart or a convenience store? And it was then that I really understood that so many of our parents owned liquor stores. And then after I did more research, I realized that 75% of all Koreans own liquor stores in South LA, or the 75% of the liquor stores in South LA were Korean owned. And I think we just saw so many of our stories that are similar but so different that I feel like, okay, I gotta tell this story because I haven't seen this perspective before when it comes to the LA uprisings, or even I think I just had so many questions, like how so many Korean people were liquor store owners. Like why is this happening, and where is it going next? Because a lot of the second generation children aren't taking over their parents' store, or if they are, they're really integrating the community like Danny, and really revamping it to have the most updated technology and things like that. And so I feel like I try to show kind of the origin stories, especially when it came to Korean people and liquor stores, to where it's heading.
Do you feel Liquor Store Babies like you and Danny grew up the same way and end up the same way, or everyone becomes something entirely different?
I think that's why I showed me and Danny too, because I felt like me and Danny were on different side of the spectrum, where we both grew up in liquor stores, and yet why do we feel so differently about them? On one hand, I feel like for me, I've known a lot of liquor store babies who don't like being in the store because of bad memories, whereas Danny, I feel like he's really this is a new adventure for him, that he has a new mission that he wants to do. And even a lot of the South LA liquor stores now are run by children of liquor store owners, and they've been really taking over and revamping it. So I always felt like, okay, this is a really good example of two different people who are taking separate journeys but have almost the same origin story.
So you yourself as a liquor store baby, and because you have your own path, especially we all know that as a filmmaker, was it hard for you to say goodbye to that kind of life?
I think we've been anticipating the goodbye for so long that when it happened, it felt like, I don't think we all processed it yet, just because for us we're just moving on to the next day. But now that it's, I can't go back. The store isn't ours anymore. So when I step into it, it feels totally different. They've modeled it differently too. So I just always say it's like an end of an era, that this was part of our lives, and now we've, in a sense, passed.
Now, of course, watching the film, everyone could tell that you grew closer with your father. Talk about basically growing together through this production, and what is it like now after the production?
Of course, I feel like the film brought us closer together, just because we were able to have these conversations, even fight on camera. And now it's a totally different journey, because I'm going to a lot of these festivals and we're able to travel together. We're actually going to go to Korea again together for a festival, and I think he's really proud of what we have both accomplished in this sense.
Now, of course, you included lots of fun things in there. Your father singing, all the dancing. Was that basically just the camera rolling and you decided to put it in, or was that all purposeful?
It was, I tried to plan everything. So as, I think because the subjects and the stories I want to tell ended up inevitably are somewhat dark and serious, that I wanted to create levity. And at the end of the day, if I'm trying to make my favorite movie, what do I want to see that makes sense? And even though I think because I also wanted this as like a love letter to my dad and my community, that I was like, how do I highlight their strengths? And my dad loves singing, and he's actually really good at it. So I was like, okay, this is an image that I had in my head. How do we make it happen? And I'm glad that it came pretty close to what I had envisioned.
Now, speaking of the serious and dark tones of the film, because Korean liquor stores or Korean marts and so on, they always bring up the LA riots back of the 1990s. But I want to say you are way too young to to remember the LA riots. So in your perspective, what is the LA riots and how do you react to a story like that today?
I was barely 3 when it actually happened. We pretty much lived a couple blocks off from one of the major streets that were burning down. But I think that when I learned it in school, it was like a line. It was like LA uprising, and then Korean store owners were somewhat involved. And then I think for me, I had such an immediate reaction because I never knew about it. And then obviously I had to do more research, and I think I just wanted to know more, just because something about being Korean is that even if you didn't live it, it's almost as if you have, and you can totally feel the pain and stories and suffering from previous generations. So I felt pretty close to what happened, even though I didn't live through it. And then I think that obviously in 2020, after George Floyd's death and a lot of the protests that were happening, and even across America, a lot of Korean store businesses were, all businesses were pretty much targeted. I think back then it was slightly different, but I think we saw a glimpse of it, and I think we just saw kind of history repeating itself. So I think I was trying to figure out, has anything changed, and how do we move forward? I don't know if that answers your question. So.
Well, let me re-ask the question that you just asked. Mm-hmm. Has anything changed between 1992 and 2020? Because 1992 LA riots, from my memories, was because it was a culture clash. People didn't understand each other's cultures, such as not looking directly into the eyes when speaking and so on. And some people found that disrespectful or different language barriers. But in 2020, in my opinion, the riots didn't target Korean marts directly anymore. It just went in general.
Mm-hmm. I think so much of it, a lot of the protests that happen in America is because of police brutality, and I think obviously Black Americans are so fed up with how they were being treated in their own community. And of course, one of the incidences was Soon Jae-do, a Korean store owner, murdering a Black child, Latasha Harlins, and her getting away with it essentially. And so much of the anger that they felt, the injustice that they felt towards the police also included other incidences, including Soon Jae-do, who people should not get away with murder. And I think they were feeling so much, so I think a lot of that pain came out, and inevitably Korean people, especially the way that the uprising was going, it mostly it could have went all the way to Beverly Hills, and it didn't, because a lot of our neighborhoods in Koreatown is not protected by the police because they want to protect other assets. So I feel like a lot of the anger and pain kind of was somewhat targeted, but it kind of just came out. and I think a lot of the Korean community were just collateral damage.
Yeah, and you show the healing process, especially with Danny's store, very well with his community buildup. Now, you had such a great experience with your first feature documentary. So what are you up to now? You have projects lined up, or you just want to promote this film for now?
Everything. I mean, the film finally hits video on demand May 26th, and then we are going to be having our broadcast premiere on POV PBS on July 10th. And so after that, I initially thought I would be writing a narrative before the documentary. So I am going to go back to the writing and figure out that story now that I made my first film.
Well, let me wrap it up with one last question for you. Is as audiences have a chance to watch this film everywhere, what is the one most important take you hope they walk away with?
I guess a little bit more empathy, because we do live in this day and age where we feel like we can write people off, where we can, so much of it, even when we talk about cancel culture, which sometimes exists, sometimes it doesn't, I feel like there's no thought into it, that one person makes one mistake and we completely write them off, and I feel like it's not healthy as us as people to cut people off like that or judge so quickly. So maybe a little bit of empathy, maybe taking the time to talk to your parents or get to know your neighbors or things like that, because everybody has their own story and their own struggles. So it'd be good to try to come together.
Most excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your story, and have fun this film festival.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I'm so excited.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.